A significant moment in the past could be coming back to haunt President Trump's nominee for the Supreme Court. 2 years ago, at a conservative event, Judge Brett Kavanaugh was asked if he could think of a Supreme Court case that deserved to be overturned. He hesitated to comment at first and then gave this answer.
Actually, I'm going to say one, Morrison v. Olson.
That's the independent counsel statute case.
It's been effectively overruled, but I would put the final nail in.
Hear, hear.
Okay, now let me just tell you a little about this. On Morrison versus Olson, the Supreme Court decided back in 1988 that the Independent Counsel Act was constitutional. There are lots of interesting points to debate about it, but they did decide it was constitutional. This is important because right now President Trump and his campaign are being investigated by a special counsel, Robert Mueller, and Kavanaugh has already said he doesn't think a sitting president should be indicted. Now, there are distinctions between an independent counsel and a special counsel, but there are important similarities, and joining me now to discuss them is Liz Holtzman. She's an attorney and former U.S. Congresswoman. She was one of the authors of the Ethics in Government Act, which governed this whole idea. So while that has evolved and changed, this particular case, this law expired in 1998 or 1999, but the special counsel is based on a very similar concept, that someone other than the president can appoint a prosecutor.
Right. Well, the basic idea is it's Government and Ethics Act.
Yeah.
Is what originated. It grew out of Watergate. The idea was a president can't investigate himself.
Right.
And the president can't be in charge of investigation of people close to him. So it's really an ethics issue. If the public is to have confidence in the Department of Justice and in an investigation, the person being investigated can't pick the prosecutor.
So the argument,
simple.
In 1988, the argument that Scalia made was that the power to prosecute is executive authority housed in the office of the President of the United States, so no one else can take that authority away.
Right. And by the way, he was the only dissenter.
Right.
Let's just remember that. And it was there were plenty of Republicans on the court. He was the only dissenter. And his opinion, in my view, is just nonsense because there are many reasons. First of all, we have court-appointed prosecutors all the time. For example, U.S. attorneys, when their office is vacant and it's not being filled, the interim U.S. attorney is appointed by the courts.
Right. And that is seen to be valid.
Nobody's challenging
so by definition,
that's going on constantly.
By definition, a prosecutor who's not appointed by the president can do its job.
Not only not appointed,
stand.
but they're not confirmed by the Senate.
Right.
So here you have two problems. We're not appointed by the president, appointed by the courts, not confirmed by the Senate.
Right.
And yet every time a U.S. attorney is out of office and there's no one immediately to replace him, the interim U.S. attorney is picked by the courts. And this hasn't caused any consternation. The problem is that the people, and I'm troubled to see that Kavanaugh is one of them, wants to say that the president has total power. This is like, you know, a dictatorship view that only that prosecutions only can be housed in the White House and the presidency, and that's just wrong.
So the interesting part here is we had heard Brett Kavanaugh had said that he didn't believe a president could be indicted. This is one step further, what we're hearing today at what he said at the American Enterprise Institute. He's saying the president or those around him shouldn't even be able to be investigated by somebody not appointed by the president.
Correct, and not confirmed by the Senate. Correct. And so what we're seeing is a president, we're seeing kind of a decimation, a nuking of the idea that a president can't pick his own investigator.
Because we associate that with kings and dictators, right? The idea that there can be nobody who can investigate a president.
Nobody independent of the president.
Yeah. I do draw a distinction between people who say that a president can't be indicted in office. I think that's a sort of a separate discussion than the fact that they can't even be investigated?
Independently, of course. That's very scary because what do we have then if we don't have an independent person reviewing presidential misconduct? We're into dictatorship land. That's not what the framers ever intended. Do
you think this will have any impact on anyone right now? Because the people who get to vote on Kavanaugh probably have made their minds up.
Well, whether they made their minds up, this seems to be kind of an esoteric point, although to me it goes essentially to the integrity of our government and whether we have really a system of checks and balances, whether the constitutional limits on presidential power exist or not. And this sounds like Kavanaugh is for the president's expansion of power, and that's dangerous.
Let's listen to what Chuck Schumer said about this new discovery.
Judge Kavanaugh, particularly after this interview, needs to recuse himself from anything having to do with the Mueller probe.
So that's one answer, that if he is confirmed, he just can't be involved in this.
Yes, but he can be involved in dealing with with a challenge to Mueller, or if he recuses himself from everything, I guess he wouldn't. But
Right.
do we know whether he's going to recuse himself?
No,
I remember
but in
that
Watergate
Scalia,
that did happen, right? We had one recusal.
Yes,
it was
Rehnquist.
But
Because-
Rehnquist had worked in the administration.
Correct. But Dick Cheney had gone gun hunting
Yeah.
with Scalia, and was a friend of Scalia's, and Scalia didn't recuse himself in a case involving Dick Cheney. So we can't, at this point, force Supreme Court justices to recuse themselves. It depends on their own sense of integrity, and some of them may not be as great as it should be.
Well, assuming this goes to the Senate before the midterms, Senator Jeff Flake of Arizona is going to get a vote. He was asked how he would consider this.
Washington Post looked at this and talked about the tenuous, gave it to Pinocchio's, the assertion that what he has written about this would somehow impede his ability to consider this if something got to the Supreme Court. So that doesn't contribute.
You don't think his feelings on that, as expressed in the past, are problematic in terms of Mueller?
I don't. I mean, well, that'll certainly be explored in hearings that we have, but nothing on its face.
Sort of a non-answer.
Right.
It'll be explored in the hearings.
Right.
Yeah, as you said, it may not have the impact on those who are
But it
prepared to
shows
vote for
where
it.
his philosophy is coming from.
Yep.
And it shows a real lack of standing up for the Government and Ethics Act and concern about integrity of government operation.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.